If you're curious as to what the day-to-day life is like when you are deployed to a combat zone in the Army, stick around. What's up, friends? I'm U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos, and in this video I'm kind of trying to give you an example as to what you might expect from the lifestyle if you were deployed to a combat zone in the United States Army. Now, I was an 88 Mike in the Army, and I've deployed twice to Iraq. First time was to northern Iraq, and then the second time was to Baghdad. So my experiences are a little bit limited to the 88 Mike lifestyle and certain other kind of things that I experienced. So for some people out there, the kind of experience may vary a little bit here or there. But just to kind of give you a little bit of what you can kind of expect, I'm going to give you my kind of take, my experiences and everything from the 2 times that I was deployed into a combat zone. So just kind of, take it for what it is. It's not going to be the be-all, end-all kind of explanation to every MOS as to what to expect, but I can give you just personally my experiences as to what my day-to-day life was kind of like while deployed. So first up, for the experience of going to Iraq, it was, kind of a thing where we sent people in waves. Certain people went at a certain time, other people went at a different time, and it's a really long flight. It takes forever to get there, but you would fly to Kuwait first, and you would go in Kuwait and you'd be usually settled in one of the bases in Kuwait for probably about a month, just doing training, kind of getting acclimated to the time zone, sometimes receiving equipment and sending equipment into Iraq, and a lot of other things that you kind of had in that process. Now, while we were in Kuwait, it was just these big tents and just a bunch of cots all over the place, and that's what we were sleeping in. And we had, classes we'd have to go to some days. Some days we were just trying to get acclimated to the time. And it was kind of tough because, it's a big time difference from the United States. So a lot of us would end up sleeping during the day and being awake during the night. And they would try to, keep us busy. But there's only so much you're really doing during that time frame. Sometimes it's waiting for stuff to show up. Sometimes you only have so many classes you have to do. So it really kind of varied from day to day. Some days were busier than others, and those days they weren't very busy. A lot of times you ended up sleeping because you still weren't quite adjusted to that time zone. Now, my first deployment, we brought a lot of our vehicles with us, so we ended up having to transport those vehicles up into Iraq, whereas my second deployment wasn't quite that crazy. So you were really in Kuwait, receiving some equipment that we had show up, like Connexes and different other things that we had to still try to transport with us up to Iraq. And then we were doing classes, and then we would fly into where we were going. Now, because we've pretty much pulled out of a lot of those countries, maybe some stuff in Afghanistan, it would probably be very similar to that first deployment where we're gonna have to bring equipment with us. Where my second deployment, we had left a lot of equipment behind, and we were making it a lot easier, so units would simply just take over somebody else's equipment instead of having to send that equipment back to the United States and then the other unit have to bring their stuff from the United States. It was just a pain logistically, so we started doing it where we would just leave our equipment in place and another unit would fall in on our equipment. So probably if something came up again, we'd probably have to go back to that way because all the equipment that we did leave behind in Iraq got turned over to the Iraqis. I'm not sure what the equipment situation is like in Afghanistan, but it might be a similar type of situation where we're gonna have to bring all of our equipment again and then push it into wherever we need to go to. Now, as far as once you're actually in that combat zone, what the day-to-day life is like, it's kind of, pretty hectic for the most part. You're not going to get anything like days off. You do have a little bit of free time here and there, and that'll really vary based on what your mission is, what your MOS is, what unit you're with, and all that kind of thing. So you tried to make the best out of the free time that you did have when you did get it. So you don't get those days off or anything, and my first deployment was 12 months, the second one was 15 months, and those were 12 months and 15 months basically straight, with the exception of somewheres in there you usually got to take your 15 days of vacation back in the United States. So other than those 15 days, there was no days off. I didn't get any days to sleep in, no days to, just enjoy the day and have fun. I just got limited time here and there to try to make the best of and have some free time. The big thing that a lot of soldiers usually do on their free time is watch movies. They usually had like a little shop or something on that fob or base, or sometimes somewheres where you can get like these pirated DVDs that were basically someone recording the movie on a movie screen with a camcorder, and you know, people were probably walking by in front of the camcorder every now and then. That's how we watched new movies. We didn't have any kind of theater or nothing, so if we wanted to see new movies, that's usually what we did. And sometimes you get older movies too that are better quality, and then if you had a PX or something on post, then sometimes you can get, you know, better quality videos from those with DVDs. And then a lot of people would share on like other hard drives. They would, you know, maybe trade movies that they had gotten from somebody who, you know, just brought a bunch with them, and will copy them from hard drive to your hard drive to your laptop, because you can bring stuff like that. You can bring like a laptop, an iPod, a little bit of entertainment. Some people will bring like portable DVD players. Some people even brought like PlayStations if they had a chance to maybe get like a TV really cheap from another unit that was leaving. There was different situations like that where you could, you know, have some sort of entertainment for those times that you would get with your off time. You didn't really do a lot of PT. There would usually be, it seemed like my experience at least, was spurts of PT. You would go maybe a month or two straight of no PT, just doing nothing but missions, and then someone would be like, okay, we need to start doing some PT here. So you guys either need to start doing some PT in the morning, in the afternoon, sometime when you have free, and that would last for a while, and then you get so busy again with missions that would kind of fall off, and you'd go back to, you know, a couple months straight of just doing missions. But you still had to try to do something. A lot of people would go to the gym and work out. We still were required to do PT tests. We would still do PT tests every, you know, when it required while we were there. The only thing we really didn't have to do is do qualification with our weapons. So that was the only thing that kind of, you know, we got away without having to do, at least from my experience, but we did still usually do PT tests while in that combat zone on the FOB. So a lot of times you'd have really early missions or really late night missions. Most of the time we didn't do a whole lot during the day. Most of the operations we wanted to do was during the night. So a lot of that meant, you know, going and prepping your vehicles during the day, maybe getting a little bit of sleep before mission, once your vehicles were all ready to go, and then going on a mission late at night, and then being out until the sun came up, and then you'd be heading back to the base, and then maybe get a little bit of rest, and then you're back at it, you know, after getting a little bit of, you know, sleep, and back in the motor pool, working on your vehicles, getting stuff ready for the next mission that would come up. So for the most part, it's back-to-back missions, especially like for my job. You know, we had to do things that were called log packs. So we had a lot of other small FOBs that were near us too. We had soldiers that were stationed at, you know, manning outposts and doing different tasks and everything for like our scouts and everything. And so we would have to bring, you know, like breakfast chow to them, bring supplies to them, sometimes bring dinner. Sometimes their first sergeants or their units would come pick it up from the main base, but there's a lot of times we would bring it to them, drop it off, and do like this little thing in the morning, and then do it again in the evening, and then bring other trucks with us, drop off water, drop off parts for their vehicles that they needed for their mechanics. So that was pretty consistent, where you always had at least a morning kind of mission and a night mission, and then somewhere's in there there'd be probably something else. For my kind of unit, for like the second deployment, there's a lot of barrier missions that we had to do during the late night into the morning. We would still have like meetings and everything. Me as a leader, I would have to usually go to an evening meeting if I was, you know, still on base and I wasn't off on mission. Then I would usually have some kind of meeting that I'd have to go to receive some notes, something that's happening the next day, maybe, you know, kind of break down who's going to do the next set of missions and all that kind of thing. And then I would have to gather up my soldiers and brief them later in the evening. Usually it'd be sometime after dinner chow. So back in like garrison back in the United States, when you're not deployed, a lot of times they do this maybe like at, you know, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and then brief the soldiers before leaving for the day. But in Iraq, it was kind of hard to do that. So you'd pretty much be working all the way up to dinner chow, going to dinner, and then probably sometime after dinner, doing some meeting kind of late-ish at night, getting those notes, and then putting out to the soldiers before they'd go to bed. Now, as far as some of the amenities and things that were on base, it really just depends on the base. How well established it was, you'd have a lot more than some of the ones that are a little bit more remote. So like we had these JSSs or these COPs that we would man, and those ones didn't have anything. That was nothing but soldiers. But usually the FOBs and the bigger posts would have, you know, some more amenities. Now, certain ones would only have maybe like a trailer that had like a little PX inside of it that had like the essentials and a little bit of cool stuff, like maybe some magazines, maybe a few CDs or something, a few DVDs, but mostly it was just stocked with like the main essentials you needed, like soap and shampoo and socks and a few other things here and there. Some of the larger bases would have like a much larger PX that actually had TVs and DVD players and gaming systems and all sorts of craziness. So like my first deployment, all we really had was a trailer, and it just had the real basics from it. And then my second deployment, I was in Baghdad on a large FOB, which was called BIOP. And that one had a huge PX. That one had TVs, that one had DVD players, all sorts of stuff. One of my friends ended up buying a PlayStation there so he could play games on his off time. They had everything at that one. Some of them usually have fast food as well. Now, like my first deployment, no fast food. We didn't have anything but the chow hall, and that was it. I don't think we had anything else other than the chow hall. And then my second deployment when we were in Baghdad on BIAP, much more established of a FOB, so we actually had really nice stuff. We had Taco Bell, we had Cinnabon, we had Popeye's chicken, they had, I forget what else they had. They had green bean coffee. They had quite a bit of stuff that if you wanted to, you go get something to eat there if you had the free time to go over there and get Taco Bell or Burger King or whatever they had on base. So a lot of those amenities just depend on the size of the FOB, if they have them or they don't have them. Then usually they had like an internet cafe. My first deployment, it was inside of a tent with some computers, and you got in line and each soldier got maybe like 30 minutes to an hour to use the computer for, and then when your time was up, then they would let you know, and then the next soldier get to get online to check their email, play on social media, whatever the case might be. My second deployment though, we actually had the option to be able to buy internet for our little chews, is what they were called, these little small little Connex type of living areas that we lived in. The internet was really expensive. I think it was something like $80 or something a month, and it was really slow. Like, it was really tough to stream video. You try to watch like a YouTube video or even try to watch Netflix or anything like that, it kind of was a little bit sketchy sometimes. Sometimes you could, watch a little bit and then you'd have to buffer and then watch a little bit more. During the peak hours is really bad. Sometimes if you did it like in the middle of the night when most people on the base are sleeping or on mission, then a lot of times you could get pretty good internet speeds because it wasn't being bogged down by everybody, but it wasn't anything great. You were paying a lot of money for really slow internet if you had it that way. Another one that I really liked, like on my second deployment, was going to the Red Cross. They had a Red Cross building that a lot of people would send like snacks and foods and stuff to the Red Cross that they would bring out there, and they would have these big Boy Scout popcorn tins that they would be giving out for free. You could use their internet there, you could use their phones. It was pretty amazing. I really loved like the Red Cross tent. And then they also have like regular phone booths ones too, where you can pay to use it. You can do, I can't think what the phone calls are called now, but you could do a special type of phone call. If any of you remember the name of these types of phone calls, leave it in the comments to remind me if I haven't figured it out already. But you do this special type of phone call where you'd call a nearby base and they would route you from that base to a local operator to be able to connect with whoever it is that you wanted to talk to, and you could do these phone calls for free that way. Otherwise, you would either just pay for the minutes, get a phone card that you'd have to enter the number in to be able to use those minutes on the phone card, and that's how you did it. Some people even get like little cheap cell phones from like little Haji shops on base, and then you have to buy these phone cards, and they were kind of a little bit pricey, but you could add minutes onto that cell phone and call back home. Usually it was really tough to get signal. I feel like when I was in Baghdad, I had one, and it was really tough to get signal. I didn't have one my first deployment when I was in the northern part of Iraq, but my second one, it was usually pretty tough to get a good signal. So other things they have on base, they have of course the chow hall, which is usually really nice when you're deployed. They have civilians running it with some soldiers, but they usually had really good food when you're deployed. It's actually pretty amazing usually. If you're on the main FOB, if you're on one of those remote outposts and COPs and JSSs, you're probably just getting some tubs of food. It would usually be decent food. It wasn't necessarily bad food, but it wasn't quite as nice as when you'd be on these larger FOBs and they're being cooked by these civilians, and they have like Wednesdays sometimes it'd be like shrimp and lobster, and they had it actually pretty good on those more established FOBs and bases. You also had gyms. They would have usually some sort of gym that you could utilize so you could work out, and a lot of people would take advantage of that and work out on their off time and usually get pretty buff, while on deployment, because a lot of their spare time would be spent, at the gym. Now when it comes time towards the end of the deployment, we kind of do a very similar kind of fashion of going back in waves. You will have, you'll find out when your flight's going to be leaving, maybe like a week in advance. You'll start getting your stuff ready, and then it's kind of the whole experience of going back takes a little bit of time as well. You'll go and you'll be waiting at the airstrip for maybe like several hours, maybe like 12 hours or so before you actually fly out. And then you're going to go to Kuwait, and then you end up spending like a day or two in Kuwait, going through customs, and then flying back to the United States. And then once we finally made it back to the United States, usually you get like 4 days off when you arrived, and then you come back and start doing some things of like cleaning weapons and doing different, maybe some classes. You usually had like a lot of classes when you came back from Iraq. And then once everybody got back, then usually shortly after that, maybe a couple weeks or so, everybody go on like a block leave kind of time frame. And so the whole unit be on leave and then come back and start your day-to-day operations just back in the United States. So there you go, that's kind of a little bit of my experience when being deployed to a combat zone. Like I said, I was deployed to Iraq twice, so that's kind of just how it went for me personally. And it may be very similar for a lot of other people out there, but there's also going to be other units that have a very, very different experience than what I had. So for those of my veteran friends out there that are watching who have deployed to a combat zone, maybe leave some comments down below, some key things that you remember that, you know, made up that lifestyle that you had while you were deployed to a combat zone. And for those of you that are not yet in the military or not planning on joining the military, it doesn't matter, whatever, and you have some questions that you're curious about from, you know, my perspective of being in a combat zone, feel free to leave some comments down below as well. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to hit that thumbs up. I got a couple of videos over here that you may find enjoyable as well, so check them out. If you are new and you are not yet subscribed to my channel, go ahead and make sure to hit that subscribe and go ahead and hit that bell, that way you get notified, especially for the live streams. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Christopher Chaos, and I will see you next time. See ya.